been about 450 days or so since the M2 iPad Pro here was released, and so that presumably means that sooner than later, the M3 is gonna be hitting store shelves. But in that time, I put a lot of miles on this particular iPad Pro, so I wanna reflect a little bit on how it's worked for me, while also simultaneously discussing what the next iPad Pro, the M3 version, presumably, should and could bring. Let me just start by saying though that the M2 iPad Pro first look video, which you're looking at right now, said everything that you needed to know about the specs and why this device is different from a MacBook Pro. So I'm gonna link that up for you in case you either missed it or wanna revisit it. But it's really curious to me, and maybe this has happened to you too, how over the years I've flipped back and forth in my mind, and actually in my life as well, between which device, the iPad Pro or the MacBook Pro, I actually consider to be my main computer. And that's changed and shifted over the years as various capabilities and features have continued to evolve on both machines. Now there's a recent example of this shift, of this wave happening in my own life recently as I've begun to get into the world of open source local LLMs or AI models. On the Mac, I can visit Hugging Face, a repository of a bunch of LLMs, and download those and then use an app like LM Studio or Ollama, or even just use the terminal to run a really fast and capable private local LLM, which is not something that I can do on the iPad right now to the same extent. That's not even close. So because of that, I've kind of been getting back into my MacBook Pro as the thing that's sort of the anchor of my Apple ecosystem. Now, I'm not what you would call a Macitarian, right? When it comes to devices, I'm actually omni-Apple. But here's one thing that's really interesting. The Apple Pencil here is a magnet. It's a powerful magnet, and it keeps drawing me back to the iPad Pro for certain activities that just work better, flow better out of my brain into a device using the Apple Pencil. For instance, though it's possible to use Freeform on the Mac, I can't or I won't because I really like to use it with the Apple Pencil on the iPad Pro. There is no better experience for me using something like Freeform than on the iPad Pro. Now, I have to admit, as somebody who's plowing a lot of my time into starting a startup right now, I haven't been using the iPad Pro for gaming or for viewing content, streaming movies or TV shows, because I've just been busy. So this has been more of a productivity device than an entertainment device for me lately. And why do I bring that up? Well, if the new iPad Pro is gonna bring an OLED display to the iPad lineup, then it's not gonna make a huge splash in my life in the way that I'm using the iPad Pro like it might in some other people's. Actually, if OLED comes, what it's gonna be like for me is something kind of akin to the sound dampening in a luxury automobile, right? It's nice, and when you're not in a luxury automobile after having been in one, you definitely notice, right? It feels a lot louder on the interstate, for instance, but it's also not the kind of thing that is the reason why you buy that device or car in the first place. So that, I think, is how OLED is gonna feel to me at this stage right now in my personal and professional life, but people's mileage is gonna vary. On the other hand, an M3 chip arriving in an iPad Pro, that could be a really big deal for me. The chip coming to the next iPad Pro could be an actual boost to things that I use personally and make a difference. For instance, if it enables the same sort of LLM tinkering that I'm able to do on the Mac side of things, on the iPad Pro, that's something that I will use, that will be a big bump over what was previously possible. And by the way, I don't have anything to announce at the moment, but if you're curious, the thing that my business partner and I are working on is developing an AI system that's grounded in reality. It's not gonna try to interpret reality for you. It's going to allow reality to speak for itself. So if that's something that you want to be notified about when it's available, then just leave me a comment and I'll make sure to respond with a link when that's online. Also, just quickly, regardless of how Apple improves the next iPad Pro, you can always improve your own self, no matter what iPad you're using, with my course, Learning to Be Productive, which will help you get more done in the Apple ecosystem in less time, and it's on sale right now for the new year, so check out that coupon code down in the description. At the moment, the top tier storage option for the iPad Pro is 2 terabytes. And you can get an iPad Pro with 2 terabytes starting at $21.99. If the new iPad Pro ends up offering a storage bump, say in the neighborhood of 4 terabytes, then that could actually make a pretty big difference for people. People like me, at least, who are interested in taking advantage of the Pro apps that have finally started to land on the iPad platform that people pined for and complained about not being there for years. You know, a more professional workflow does require more local storage in many circumstances, especially like video editing, for instance, and carrying around external storage when you hop on a plane or go to a meeting or even just hit the coffee shop or wherever it is that you're gonna get some work done is definitely not ideal. My wallet is worried about what the price is gonna be, right, for that 4 terabyte tier, but mentally though, I'm really excited about this. Of course, one of the greatest upgrades you could get yourself, whether or not you want to buy an expensive new iPad or not, is to get yourself a paper-like screen protector. Personally, I love my paper-like screen protector. It definitely ranks up there as one of my must-have accessories whenever I get a new iPad. So whenever I do get the new iPad, and you can be sure that I will, then I'm gonna slap a paper-like on there immediately, and I recommend that you do too. Let's talk about the cameras. I think that the coming era of spatial computing, as Apple calls it, is finally going to make people really start to care about the camera on the back of the iPad Pro. People are gonna wanna start scanning things into their devices and manipulating those items on their screen before placing them into a VR or AR scenario. And while you're gonna be able to do that with an iPhone, the iPhone has a great camera, the iPad has a much better screen for doing this. And I would love to use the Apple Pencil, for instance, to be, you know, designing, coloring, shading these 3D objects versus trying to do that with my finger on a much smaller screen. Apps like Polycam are going to become mainstream, I think, not just cool things that you could do, but actual things that people start to use. Now, in terms of charging, do I care if the iPad is wired or wireless? There's been a lot of talk flying around about the next iPad Pro maybe getting wireless charging or even reverse wireless charging if you want to charge your AirPods Pro, you know, while you're on the go and you don't have a cord. Here's the thing though, I care a lot less about how this thing charges and a lot more about how long that charge stays around. Here's the thing though, personally, I really care a lot less about how this thing charges versus how long that charge lasts. The battery life on the M2 iPad Pro has been lackluster, honestly. It's been a bit disappointing. Not so much that it keeps me from using it, but also it's enough that I have to charge it at really inconvenient times if I really use it a lot, which is more often than not, depending on the task that I'm doing. If I'm really in the mood to get some stuff out with the Apple Pencil, do some design or something, I'm using this, and I like to use it with a nice bright screen, which really drains the power. My guess is that the M3 iPad Pro is probably gonna have some marketing centered around the new chip enables that same great battery life, even though we've added the OLED display, and kind of spin it like there's no extra battery life, but it was already really good, so we've kept it at that level. And you know what, I'm sure it's tricky, but it's Apple. They should be able to put stellar battery life in the Pro iPad, and I hope they do. Now, one of my favorite things about the iPad Pro has been the Magic Keyboard. I really love the Magic Keyboard. I know there's some people that really don't, but there's been a lot of buzz about a potential redesign of the Magic Keyboard, and I actually think that's probably a good thing if that turns out to be true, because though I very much like to type on this keyboard, it is heavy. That's one thing. And also, it's missing some keys. We don't have that row of function keys. It'd be nice to have those. And this great trackpad, which works really great. It's the best trackpad out there for the iPad, in my opinion. It is rather small. So there's definitely room for improvement here. However, I don't want Apple to look at this and say, how do we make it more Mac-like? That could end up being a bit of a turnoff for me, and I assume other people as well. Now, Apple is launching the Vision Pro. This is going to change the Apple ecosystem in a huge way, could end up changing the world. We already know that the Vision Pro is going to have some interactions with the Mac. You can put the Vision Pro on, look at a Mac screen, and that screen will get sucked out into the spatial realm, basically into the AR realm. I have no idea what the interactions may or may not be between the Vision Pro and the iPad Pro in the future, but I can tell you this, even with the advent of the Vision Pro, which I do think is pretty interesting, though I haven't yet been able to try it. Apple hasn't sent one my way. I am personally still going to have a place for the iPad in my workflow because I just like the tactile nature of using the Apple Pencil. I already made a video addressing the issue of whether or not the iPad is dying. You can check that out. It's linked up down below for you as well. But I do want to end this video by saying that I hope that the iPad, including the iPad Pro, isn't headed for a period of neglect, sort of like the Mac experienced before Apple introduced Apple Silicon and their own chips and sort of had a Mac revival in recent years. You know, there's a time in the recent past where people were looking at the Macs and just saying, well, Apple forgot about it. It's over for the Mac. And I hope that's not going to be the case for a device that I've found so valuable, invaluable, really, in recent years. Now, switching gears real quick, if you're interested in my startup and what we're building, go ahead and subscribe to the Daily Tech newsletter. It's linked up down below, and I'll be sure to notify people that are newsletter subscribers when our startup has launched. That's linked up down below, as are some of the other videos that I've mentioned. Thanks for hanging out. I'll catch you in the next video. Later.